The question I get asked most often is, how did I get into the sport of triathlon? What motivated me to start doing this? There were two things that happened in my life around the time that I moved and started working in the Washington, D.C. area. The first is that a good friend of mine invited me to his wedding and needed my tuxedo measurements so that he could rent me a tuxedo. It was at that moment that I realized that I had gained about 50 pounds in the first 2 years that I had been married. This led me to start eating healthier and to start running maybe 1 mile at the gym on the treadmill a couple times a week. Also, I had to start either driving a car or taking the metro into work every day, living in Northern Virginia and working in Washington, D.C. I could either sit in traffic for an hour or I could sit on a metro for an hour. Either way though, it was pretty expensive and it was extremely stressful. Traffic jams, delays on the metro, one way or the other, I just couldn't seem to get to work on time. During one of the delays on the metro, I felt that there had to be a way that I could have the power to get to work on time. That there had to be some way to get to work without so much stress and uncertainty. It crossed my mind that I should try riding my bike to work. So I tried it out one time, and it was about a 28-mile round trip, and it took me about a week to recover. So I did that for a few weeks, and finally was able to jump up to doing it twice a week, Monday and Friday. It took me about a month to recover again. All the meanwhile riding in twice a week though, and I was eventually able to move up to 3 times a week, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. I kept going at about this pattern and eventually worked my way up to riding into work every day of the week. This was probably the biggest milestone in terms of my progress as an endurance athlete that got me towards becoming an Ironman. Biking into work 5 days a week resulted in 141 miles a week on the bike. And the most amazing part about this was that it didn't take any more time than driving or taking the metro would, and I was saving $10 a day by not having to take the metro. A lot of people have asked what it was like riding my bike to and from work in the DC area. What places did I get to see? What areas did I go through? A lot of people think that I'm weaving in and out of traffic, crossing busy intersections on bridges, and they imagine some kind of crazy scene like that. In reality, it couldn't be any different. I was on secluded trails and paths, and it was completely safe. I couldn't have asked for anything more enjoyable for a commute to and from work. Another thing people want to know about when they hear that I commuted to and from work by bike is how did I get from all my bike clothes into work clothes, and that was a pretty significant. That was a big deal. So these are some of the things that I'm hoping to share with everyone: is what my commute was like, how enjoyable it really was, and that it is a safe, viable option. after I started biking to work 5 days a week, I knew that I was still hungry to keep pushing myself, and I wanted to reach another milestone. The next logical step to take was to ride my bike 100 miles, what we call a century. I prepared for this mentally and physically, and I did it. It was very hard. I was extremely tired and at first had no desire to ever do anything like that again. But once that soreness and pain wears off, again, you realize you crossed another threshold. You did something you didn't think you were capable of, and I was still hungry for more. I wanted to keep pushing myself. So I was kind of into running, I was pretty into cycling. The next logical step for me was to sign up for a triathlon. But you don't just sign up for an Ironman from one day to the next. It's something you have to work your way up to. On top of all the cycling and running and things I was doing, I participated in 2 Olympic distance triathlons and 1 half Ironman in preparation for my first Ironman. The first triathlon that I did was called the Rumpus and Bumpus in Virginia. I also did a second international or Olympic distance triathlon called the Luray Triathlon. And the third triathlon I did was called the Harryman Half Ironman in upstate New York. These were very important stepping stones for me to have the confidence and the knowledge of how the sport of triathlon works to be able to do an Ironman. My routine to get me in shape to be ready to do an Ironman consisted of biking to work, to and from work every day, which was about 141 miles. And then I would also usually do a long bike ride on the weekends. Overall, I was probably getting in around 200 miles a week on the bike. In terms of running, I was going to the gym 2 or 3 times a week, early morning gym workouts, going for a run on the treadmill, and maybe every other week going for a run on the weekends. So that was usually getting me about 20 miles a week. Finally, in terms of swimming, I would make sure I went to the pool at least once a week, preferably twice a week, swimming a total of 2 to 4 miles per week. DC is the only place I know of that has a public indoor Olympic distance swimming pool. I was incredibly lucky to have that as a resource to help me build up the confidence and endurance I would need to complete the swimming portion of an Ironman. For me, nothing will ever compare to the feeling of doing my first Ironman. It was called the Chesapeake Man and was in the Chesapeake Bay in Maryland. The combination of the emotion and a little bit of anxiety leading up to that first Ironman, not knowing how you're going to feel doing a 140.6 mile triathlon, combined with the excitement of crossing that finish line for the first time and knowing that you've accomplished something that you really never thought you would ever do, that you didn't really know if you would be capable of doing until you pushed yourself. There's really nothing, I don't think, that will ever compare to finishing that first Ironman. Just the uncertainty and the excitement of reaching that goal, it's a really unique feeling. Even having done several Ironmans since that one, it's still hard to imagine anything comparing to that first time.
So tell us how you're feeling, Chad.
I feel great. Physically, I'm exhausted, but emotionally, I couldn't be any happier with the way it went. I beat my projected time in all 3 legs. The running was, even though I did faster than what I thought, it was more difficult than I thought it would be. It was just painful. I'm really tired, my legs are completely spent, but I feel great.
Living and training for triathlon in DC, I had as good of a routine and the best possible resources that anyone could ask for. Washington, D.C. is an amazing area to live in and train for triathlon. I didn't fully realize the extent of this until I moved with my family here to Idaho. everything changed in terms of my routine and the resources that I had to train. Whereas in DC, all I had to do was go to and from work to get almost 150 miles a week. Out here in Idaho, I no longer had that commute to and from work by bike. It's nice that I only live a couple miles from where I work, but now instead of just traveling to and from work, I have to wake up early just for the sake of going on a bike ride. It's a little bit harder to be disciplined and keep that up consistently. Where we lived in DC, I had essentially my own private gym. It was our apartment complex's gym, but as early as I was willing to get up, I had it all to myself. Out here in Idaho, I don't really have anything like that. So that makes it harder to go running when it's really cold because there was a treadmill I could use at the gym in DC. Another thing is in DC, there was an Olympic distance indoor swimming pool that I could use year round. Again, there's nothing really like that here in Idaho. There is a public pool, but it's very short, very overcrowded, and only open for a couple months out of the year. Other than that, I have to go to a lake or a reservoir to get my swimming in. It's important to me to continue to have triathlon in my life and to compete in at least one Ironman a year. So the things that I've had to do to stay in shape and to have the confidence to know that I'll be able to finish the 140.6 mile triathlon have been much different. I'm hoping to convey what the differences are living out here in Idaho compared to the way things used to be out in the DC area. A lot of my workouts and routines you'll see are very different. I basically just go for runs and for bike rides out in the desert, and for swimming, a lot of times it's in open water swims up in lakes and reservoirs up in the mountains. One of the important things to do as you're getting ready for any triathlon, especially an Ironman, is to incorporate at least a few open water swims into your training. It's important to get used to that feeling of being in the middle of an open body of water. It's a lot different.
Keeping it quiet while I'm starting to ride. training, that's basically where you do 2 sports of the 3 in the triathlon in the same workout, in the same day, but usually right in the same workout. So the most common thing to do is to do biking and running, and that's what I'm going to be doing today. So what I've got here, very minimalist style here, just a pair of running shoes and a pretty small bike lock. Now today I'm going out into a pretty remote area of the desert here in Idaho, so I'm not worried about anyone stealing my bike. That's just my personal style. So that's what I have packed, and I'm just gonna get on my bike and head on out.
Wish me luck.
Good luck. We'll be with you all the way.
It's my 5th time doing this. We'll see what happens.
Okay, stay warm.
Hopefully I finish.
Okay. Okay. Good luck.